Yeah, Mr. Leonhard Dreyer here is gonna have quite a story to tell his kids of how he, in his tank, single-handedly killed like 1 million German fascists. And now Germany is fascist. They're just going through all the different ideologies. And Leonhard Dreyer decided that after killing 1 million fascists, now's a good time to turn fascist himself. And his one little tank is still here, now sieging down this province from some communist rebels this time. Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk Grand Strategy, where in today's video we're gonna take a look at what would happen if the French Empire still had its Napoleonic borders in 1836. So yeah, as you can see here, France is a lot bigger than it usually is in the game. They own Catalonia from Spain, they own lots of territory here in Italy, lots of big part of Sardinia Piedmont, the big part of the Papal States, as well as Tuscany. They own the Adriatic coast, Croatia, parts of Slovenia, parts of Austria and Italy here. And they own lots and lots of additional territory here in the north. So all of Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands, as well as a large part of the Rhineland and northern Germany here. And so yeah, there's an interesting situation I think that France is in here now, because as you can see right now, I have not given the French cores on all these territories because, of course, in terms of nationality, all these territories still belong to various other different European nationalities that are, I believe, not accepted by the French. If we take a real quick look, yeah, they only accept French and French Canadian. So all of these nationalities here are gonna want to break free from the French, and all their respective countries are gonna want to reconquer those territories from the French. So what that's hopefully gonna lead to is a really difficult, interesting position for France here, where on the one hand, they are most certainly the strongest country in Europe at the start of the game, but at the same time, they're gonna have to defend against the reconquest wars from pretty much all of their neighbors. So let's really quickly just look at the great power ranking. So we can see that Great Britain right now is still the number 1 great power, with France being the number 3 great power. But of course, having all of Belgium, for example, is massively going to boost France's industrial capacity with all of that additional iron that they get, with all of that additional coal that they get. Then also in terms of their population, France is probably one of the biggest countries in the world now. We can see right after China, UK, other Chinese puppet, Russia, comes France. So a lot bigger now than, for example, Austria, their biggest mainland European rival. In terms of their division count, France can, of course, certainly build lots more divisions than usually because of all this additional territory. However, France does not start with that many divisions. We can see here France has 47 at the start of the game, with Prussia only having 46 and Austria at 30. So, for example, a coalition of Prussia and Austria could probably take down France and retake those territories. But yeah, we're gonna see how this is gonna affect the game. Gonna be interesting to see if France manages to hold this empire together, or if this French Empire can prevent, for example, Italy from forming or Germany from forming. And yeah, I'm especially curious towards the Great Wars at the end of the game, and if we're gonna see like one massive French blob that takes the role that usually Germany has in the late game Europe, where usually Germany would be the country that can pretty much just steamroll all its neighbors, as we have seen in the Byzantium video. Yeah, maybe France is gonna have that same role right now. It might also be that France is just so powerful that like none of its neighbors can really challenge it, and that we're gonna see no conflict happening pretty much throughout this game. But yeah, we're gonna see about that. I would say let's unpause and let's just see if there's any immediate conflict. Now, of course, their holdings here in Catalonia also mean that France has to fight the beginning Spanish rebellion, but that should, what's that? But that should of course be no problem for them, is what I was trying to say there. But what are we seeing here? We're seeing immediate wars against France by both Prussia and Austria, and of course the Prussian and Austrian spheres of influence here. So yeah, interesting. Is this one combined war? No, this is 2 separate wars that are both, of course, trying to take some territories back from the French. Yeah, as I said before, France doesn't have that many divisions to start with. They can build lots of new divisions, but they don't have them yet. And so I think there's a good chance that the Austrians and Prussians together are going to be strong enough to actually take down the French and retake some of their territories here. Interesting question here would also now be, will the Spanish intervene? But so far it doesn't look like it. And also, can France secure any allies? I think France's, oh yeah, there we see it. I think France's natural ally here is Russia, is what I tried to say right there. Because, well, all the other neighbors hate them, and Russia also feels somewhat threatened probably by Prussia and by Austria. But yeah, I think Russia is not in the wars. Oh, okay, Russia is in the war with Spain, but not in any of the other wars here. We already saw France piecing out with Prussia there. Prussia, I believe, taking this region right here back from the French, but not dragging the war out and not taking too much more territory. Probably also because they want to avoid the Russians getting into it. So now it's Austrian-Spanish war against the French. And it seems like there's also peace with Austria now, where I believe Austria only took one province here and left the rest in French hands. So now the final interesting question here is Spain on its own now able to defeat a weakened France that has just lost 2 wars? And it doesn't look like it. I think France is going to be able to pull through here and to defeat the Spanish. So let's see, is France planning on taking anything from Spain? Not so far. But yeah, pretty much a Russian-French alliance is guaranteed to defeat Spain. And France doesn't stand much of a chance here. So yeah, we'll quickly wait to see just what France is gonna take in the peace deal. But probably France just wants to consolidate. No, actually France wants to expand and wants to take this region right here and massively increase its Spanish territories to make up for its losses against the Austrians and Prussians here. And we see now that Spain pretty much can offer no more resistance. There's even Russian volunteers now helping out in this Spanish war. And yeah, it's just a takeover of all of Spain. Is France going to want anything else? No, Russia also wants to cut Spain down to size, and those 2 war goals pretty much fill out all that they can take from the Spanish. Yeah, there we have it. Peace. France is now, I would say, about equally powerful as before. Although this is not the most industrial. No, it is actually a pretty industrial region. Never mind. I was just going to say, I think the territory they lost from Germany is probably very valuable territory because it has lots of coal here. Same for the territory lost to the Austrians. But still, let's just quickly take a look at what this means in terms of population for the French. There's still, well, I think, I don't remember the exact value it was before, to be honest, but I think they're still pretty much at the same amount of population. And one more thing I would really like to look at is the RGO. So if we look at iron production, France is actually the number 3 producer of iron in the world. So just a little bit behind Austria, but yeah, very powerful there. In terms of steel, we can see France at the 4th position. And then where is coal? 1 second. Oh, right there. In terms of coal, France is only 5th. So actually not as powerful as I thought they would be in terms of their coal production. Now, I didn't think that the Austrians would have more coal, for example, than the French. But yeah, that's how it is. I'd say that's about all we're going to look at for the beginning, unless there's immediate other wars breaking out against the French. But I don't think someone like Sardinia, Piedmont, or the Pope is going to start any reconquest wars against the French right here. So yeah, for now we'll have a little bit of peace. So we'll check back in later. And here we see the next war. It is the French-Sicilian War that was actually started by the French to cut the 2 Sicilies down to size, which is interesting because the 2 Sicilies aren't even a great power or anything like that. And also because of how the borders are here, France can't actually move its main armies through, I believe. Or maybe they're doing that right now. Let's see if the French can walk through Lucca or Modena. And, well, yes, they can. Okay, yes, the French can. So I believe this is going to be an easy victory for the French, in which they might even take territory from the 2 Sicilies. Or, well, no, they want to cut them down to size. I don't believe they're going to take territory then. But yeah, we'll see. Don't really understand why the French decided to do this right here. I don't think the two Sicilies were a threat to them at all, and this just means that they now have one more country that probably is not the biggest fan of them. Yeah, we can see France is pretty much surrounded by enemies here, with Russia being their only friend in Europe, or their only major friend at least. And yeah, easy French victory, of course. They took out the two Sicilies. And we have a crisis where the French are trying to liberate Cuba from the Spanish. However, Spain is supported by the UK, by Prussia, by Austria, and by the Ottomans already, while France only has the Russians on their side, so they're probably gonna have to give up this demand. Yeah, they had to give it up there. Well, this world is certainly not getting boring. It's only 1842 and we already have the next major war, which is a war between the Prussian alliance that includes the United Kingdom and France and Russia. So we'll see how that's going. I believe that the French and Russians together, especially this early in the game where the Prussians don't have any significant tech advantage, we're probably going to see a Russo-French victory unless the UK can take significant pressure off the Prussians here. But it doesn't appear so. So we'll see what the French enforce from their enemies here. Interesting to see that Prussia is pretty much focusing all of its armies to fighting Russia, and somewhat successful so far in fending off the Russians, although by now the armies are slowly getting crushed. While they're not focusing so many troops on fighting the French, leaving that more to their British allies, who are also struggling significantly with the French behemoth. Yeah, so I think we're seeing peace here, and I don't think the French took anything. They're probably already having high infamy from what they took here and from cutting down the two Sicilies. So for now, they probably want to chill and just gather up strength, build up units, industrialize their countries, build railroads, and try to, well, solidify their position in Europe. And there we see the next crisis. This time, France wants Prussia to release Poland. But Prussia again has backing by Spain, Britain, and Austria, while France might, if they're lucky, get the Russians on their side. But yeah, overall, I think this is gonna be too unbalanced of a war for the French to actually want to fight it. And yeah, they once again have to accept white peace here. All right, we're about 20 years into the game, so let's take a quick look how it's going for France. So if we look at the great power ratings, France is currently the number 2 great power. It is number 3 in prestige, 2 in industry, and 6 in the military. So yeah, doing really well industrially, even out-industrializing the Prussians, which is a bit of an achievement, I guess, in this game, you could say. Although, of course, they hold some of Prussia's most valuable industrial land right here still. And yeah, other than that, not much happened in the last couple of years. We can quickly also maybe look at what those militaries are made up of. And we see that France currently has 109 brigades, divisions. What is it called in this game? Oh, brigades, okay. 109 brigades, so slightly behind the UK, but even ahead of Russia. So definitely a massive army that you have to, that you have to be scared of if you're any of France's rivals. And then in terms of the navy, France is not a naval great power, but it's definitely also not something to take lightly. They can easily, well, defeat any of their neighbors except Britain, which is not a direct neighbor, of course. But so yeah, in terms of continental Europe, France is definitely still the hegemon. And we can also see their sphere of influence also includes Switzerland, much of northern Italy, uniting their lands here in a sense. Yeah. So other than that in the world, we see the USA has taken all of its Mexican lands. It has also taken a pretty ugly and disgusting looking part of Canada just to create some border gore. And Ethiopia surprisingly won a war against Egypt. So props to Ethiopia for pulling that off and taking 2 states from the Egyptians here. What else happened? Well, not too much interesting stuff, to be honest. Netherlands is conquering some stuff here. UK is conquering some stuff here. UK also conquered Sikkim, as you might tell by me now observing as Bhutan. But yeah, that's the state of the world 20 years in. Oh, and we see the Prussian-Austrian Brothers' War has just kicked off. Is France gonna get involved in that? I don't think so. But what is it that the countries want? Austria wants to get Schlesien, while Prussia wants to get Moravia. So this might actually be a really important war, because it might, it might determine who eventually gets to form Germany and who is the great power in the German region. So I believe Prussia is more weakened by the lands they have lost here, because it's very industrial lands, while Austria has only lost more grain and fruit production and a little bit of iron too, even a little bit of precious metal. So it's not like this land doesn't matter for Austria, but I believe overall Prussia is more weakened here than Austria by the losses they had to France. So let's see if Austria can actually pull off a victory here against the Prussians. I believe Austria has the bigger army compared to Prussia, but Prussia probably has a better army quality. So we'll see who comes out on top. So far, it seems like Prussia has one really good large stack that is just able to wipe the Austrians slowly one after the other until probably eventually the Austrians are gonna run out of divisions. Let's see if that what happens. Yeah, we're seeing the Prussians just wiping the floor with the Austrians here. So overall, we're probably gonna see Prussia take Moravia from Austria. Yeah, the Austro-Prussian War is still surprisingly balanced with no side really winning, but now we might see the decisive battle of the war. And it looks like a Prussian victory, but Prussia has lost pretty much its entire army in that battle anyways. And Austria still has some of its allies sieging down German lands here. But I believe we're gonna see Prussia come out on top just because they still managed to have one decent-ish army. And yeah, that's the second to last major Austrian army gone. Are they gonna fight the last major Austrian army? No, not yet. Yeah, I gotta say, this is a really, really interesting German-Austrian war. Usually it's just Prussia, defeating the Austrians pretty easily. And even now, as I said, I think the Prussians are eventually gonna come out on top, but it took them a lot longer. And the war dragging out this long might, in the long term, of course, also mean more casualties and might leave both countries weakened. And now slowly we see the Prussians rebuilding the army, and with their stronger industry, they're just more able to rebuild the army than the Austrians. And yeah, by now I would say it's pretty clear that there is no more chance here. Oh yeah, and we saw the peace deal, and Moravia was taken from the Austrians. Also, the American Civil War broke out, I believe. Yeah, it looks like a pretty definite US victory against the CSA, so nothing too interesting here. It is 1866 and we are seeing another crisis, and this time it is the Russians wanting to liberate Hungary from the Austrians, where the Russians are supported by the French and the Austrians are supported by Bavaria, which is a great power now, and Prussia. So really interesting, because this is basically, I believe this is going to be a really interesting war if it fires off. Yeah, the UK now also supporting the Austrian side, which might be an opportunity here overall for the Austro-Prussian side to defeat the French and take some more land. With British help and with both of them on one side, I believe they have a chance, although it's still gonna be tough just because France is so powerful, and of course Russia also really powerful, strong country. And yeah, the war is in fact breaking out. So let's just really quickly look into the army numbers at the start of the war without much mobilization going on. Of the combatants, the UK is the strongest country with 154 brigades. But of course, a lot of those brigades are located in India or in other parts of the British Empire, and only a small portion are in Europe where they can actually help. And other than that, France with 150 brigades and Russia with 130 are a lot stronger than the Prussians and Austrians. So that brothers' war the Prussians and Austrians had against each other might really end up hurting them here, in that they're now both weakened and unable to defeat the French and Russian alliance. So if we see a French-Russian victory and they maybe even take land from the Prussians and Austrians here, I don't see much of a chance for the Prussians and Austrians to come back from that. I believe this crisis is a really good chance for them, and maybe the last chance for them to really stop the French behemoth and the Russian allies from dominating Europe for a very, very long time. We see the British actually helping out and actually having enough units here so that the French really have to pull back some of their armies. But overall, the French are taking the Italian lands from Austria. They're taking the Rhinish lands from Prussia. Can they walk through into the rest of Prussia? No, they cannot. So they have to, I believe, walk through the south here to get into the Prussian lands. But yeah, overall, the Russians are just about able to stop the Austrians and the Prussians. So yeah, all the Central Powers, shall we call them, all the Central Powers armies are occupied fighting the Russians in the east, which leaves the French pretty much free rein to take out Austria, Bavaria, and Prussia in this war. What is their goals? The French want Nordrhein back, and the Russians want to liberate Hungary. So both of those things are going to weaken, of course, Austria and Prussia quite significantly. Austria, obviously, because they lose massive amounts of territory to Hungary, and Prussia because Nordrhein is one of their most important industrial states and one of the states that produces a ton of coal. So yeah, if we see the French-Russian victory, and it looks very likely that we are going to see a French-Russian victory here, then I don't really see Germany being formed in this game. There is, of course, still a chance that there might be rebels forming Germany. That's always an option. But overall, it's probably going to be a Europe dominated by France. Yeah, we are seeing France has already taken Vienna, has already taken out pretty much all of Bavaria at this point. The Prussians are still even killing some Russian armies here. And it's still undecided in the east, but yeah, they have nothing here to stop the French. It also looks like the British are not invading Russia through India, even though their spheres of influence touch at least here in China. But it seems that those countries were not called into the war, and so the British armies in India have no game impact at this point. And what are we going to see as the peace deal here? Is it just going to be those two things? Well, I mean, it's two massive things, of course, Hungary as well as Nordrhein. So that's already 100% war score that they need to pull that off. So we will see if they are even able to take both of those war goals, because Hungary is, of course, a very massive thing. And I don't think they're going to be able to invade the UK, even though France is super strong, and even though France has lots and lots and lots of coastal regions that are connected to their capital, which of course means lots and lots of naval bases and lots of navy that they can build. All of that combined still does not mean that they can really challenge the Royal Navy. We see the Russian Navy being sunk by the British right here. No chance. So yeah, they're probably not going to invade the UK, and that might mean that they don't get to 100% war score anytime soon. Of course, there is ticking war score, which might help them out. Yeah, all of that combined might mean that they can't take all the war goals. But yeah, let's see. Right now, they're just finishing up the occupations of their enemies' lands here. And what did they take? Did they take nothing? Did they seriously take nothing? Wait, let me just double check. This is Nordrhein, right? Yeah, they didn't take Nordrhein, and they didn't liberate Hungary. What? So in the end, all of that combined led to nothing at all for them. Ah, maybe they white pieced out because there is a Spanish and duo Sicilian war against the French now, and the French wanted to pull back their armies to stop that advance from two forces. Is this a joint war by those two? Yes. Wait, this is a war that France started? Am I seeing this right? France started this war in the middle of another war. Why? Okay, anyways. The Ottomans also started a war against the Austrians. But yeah, France, not the smartest move. I think this war is what in the end kind of forced them to piece out the other war that they had already pretty much won. And it looks like they're even somewhat struggling to contain the duo Sicilian advance here. Maybe we could even see the two Sicilies becoming a great power. I don't think they would have an easy time forming Italy at all with how much Italian land is held by the French here. But the two Sicilies really looking rather strong and even able to take on the French armies. Now, of course, the Russians are showing up, and long term, the French just have so much more manpower and so much more industrial capacity that they are going to win this war pretty much inevitably. Especially once they peace out the Spanish, or once they, not peace out, but once they full occupy the Spanish and free up all those armies here. There's no chance for the Sicilians, of course, but really quite a good effort the Sicilians made here. They advanced all the way basically to the Franco-Italian border. But yeah, in the end, the French won this war too and cut the Spanish down to size. Is Spain a great power? No, they are not. So, not really sure why they did that. It might be just to have one less rival to worry about, of course, on their borders. But I think overall it would have benefited them a lot more if they had taken Nordrhein and if they had liberated Hungary, or even just done either of those things. So yeah, not the smartest move by France, but overall they won their wars, and that should mean that yeah, they have really high prestige now and have solidified their position as the second great power in the world. Alrighty, it's 1872 and the scramble of Africa is beginning. We're already seeing that the French are planning their first colonies around here. And I'm just very interested how this is going to affect the colonialization game here. Overall, as I said before, France has so many naval bases now that they probably have the largest capacity to, create colonies. But at the same time, having so many lands without cores might be, dragging them down a little bit in terms of their strength to operate overseas, although they are slowly beginning to get cores on all those lands. Is that also? No, that's not yet really visible in the nationalities here, although I think we're seeing slight French populations pop up here. Let's just see, is that French? Hard, yes. So a little bit of French is already spreading here. But yeah, overall, we might see a really strong French colonial game. We see the Danish and British now also starting their colonial ventures in Africa. The Portuguese not so far, apparently. I can't see anyone else. So far, it's Britain, France, and Denmark trying to establish colonies. So yeah, we'll check back in a couple minutes to see how the colonial game is going for the great powers. Interesting, Prussia has turned into a bourgeois dictatorship and has a new flag even that I don't think I've ever seen in one of these games before. So yeah, let's see if that helps them to fight off their French and Russian rivals. And yeah, in Africa we are seeing mainly the British, French and Portuguese still. I don't think there's any other great powers yet involved in the scramble. No, it doesn't look so. And all the while the colonization of Africa is going on, we see France once again trying to take a major country out of Austria. This time it's Romania, and this time even Prussia is on the French side. So even with British support, I don't think the Austrians would stand any chance in this war against France, Russia and Prussia. So while this war is going to be fought, I think it's a pretty much a given that Austria is going to have to release Romania here. Now, if they're lucky, this might also mean that the Prussians can take another state out of Austria. Maybe that's what they are trying to achieve here. Maybe they want to take, for example, Bohemia out of this crisis, which would, of course, really help them with their industrial strength, with their population. And at this point, I think the Prussians have seen that, allying up with the Austrians, even with British support, is not enough to defeat the French, is not enough to defeat the Russians. So they have to try another strategy, and that for them meant to turn into dictatorship and to betray their Austrian brothers here and now try to take over lands from the Austrians potentially. All of this might also slow down the French attempts to colonize Africa. We now see the Ottomans coming in as another great power that is colonizing parts of Africa too. and the French having a strong colony here around the Congo, while the Danish and British are seeming to be the strongest in West Africa, and the Ottomans are colonizing most of the Sahara. But yeah, this crisis was of course pretty much a given that it would be won by the French alliance here. And now that they fully occupied Austria and can get their armies back home, it's also going to be no big trouble, I think, for them to defeat the British who have invaded here and push them back into the sea. So let's see what the peace deal is going to be. France wants to liberate Romania, as we know. Russia wants East Galicia from Austria, and Prussia wants Austria to admit hegemony. So that means that the Austrian states, or the German states in the Austrian sphere of influence, will come into the Prussian sphere of influence most likely. We're also seeing, in terms of spheres of influence, the Prussians really struggling. Like, even most North German states by now are no longer in their sphere. Some of them in the sphere of France, Saxony in the sphere of Austria. So even if they could somehow magically liberate their French lands, Prussia would not be able to form the North German Federation right now. But yeah, this war resulted in the liberation of Romania, which of course further weakens the Austrians. I think we can pretty much count the Austrians, well, no more count the Austrians as a great power, as they're probably gonna fall apart further from this point on. Now in Germany we have a major Jacobin uprising that might be successful just by the sheer amount of people rising up. So it seems also that Prussia is in somewhat of a downward spiral. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if either of them manage to come back in some capacity, or if France has just secured absolute rule over the European continent with their Russian allies. And once again, the Austrians and Prussians are smashing each other's skulls in. So yeah, Napoleon must really be partying in Paris, because his enemies are just basically self-deleting and he has to do nothing to destroy them at this point. But yeah, this war looks to be very likely another Prussian victory. And this time they are going to take Bohemia and hegemony from the Austrians. So that should mean that they get Baden into the sphere of influence, Saxony into the sphere of influence, and of course one really, really important and strong region in Bohemia, one of the most industrialized states in the game. So while Austria is pretty much done for, we might see this war actually strengthening Prussia further. And who knows, maybe we'll see a miraculous comeback by Prussia after all. Ooh, big events unfolding, big events unfolding. We are seeing a conflict where France is going against their Russian allies. The alliance that has dominated Europe so far for about the first half of this game might finally split apart and might finally fall apart. I'm really hoping this is balanced enough so France thinks that they can win this, and so that we're gonna actually be able to see this war. But if the Prussians join in on the Russian side here, Russia, UK and Prussia might be strong enough so the French just accept a white peace. But even then, I would be hoping that that means a serious downturn in Franco-Russian relations. Yeah, we see at this point the only country that France is kind of friendly with still is the Ottomans in Europe, the only major country. But yeah, their alliance with Russia is now officially over, which is big news, because this, of course, is an opportunity for all of their enemies, for Spain, for the UK, for Prussia, maybe even for Austria, maybe even for the Italians, to get back at the French without Russian interference and to potentially defeat the French at some point in the future. Also, just a quick update, this is what Africa looks like in 1883. Colonization is pretty much done by now. The French have gotten a massive chunk in Central Africa, as well as a decent sized colony here in West Africa. The British are the main dominating power here on the West African coast, as well as in the south and here in the Somalia region. And the Ottomans have surprisingly really come out as one of the top 3 countries in Africa, of course. A large part of the Sahara is theirs, which is of course not very valuable, but they have also managed to get ports here in the Atlantic Ocean, and even to get all the way to Lake Victoria over here. So the Ottomans, are they a great power at this point? Yes, the Ottomans still a great power in 1883, which is surprising, I would say. And yeah, looking pretty strong. Do they have any quarters on Egypt? No, they don't. So they might not expand much further. But they are allied to Russia, so a really strong Eastern alliance. And Russia now also allying the UK. So yeah, France seems to have maneuvered itself into a pretty isolated diplomatic situation. Let's just quickly take a look around the world. Yeah, it doesn't seem like France has any allies anywhere left at this point. Also, maybe interesting to point out that the French have a one colony here on the island of Borneo. But yeah, long term, France's isolationism might not go over with too well, I'd imagine. What is this German war we're seeing? It's the Prussian-Bavarian Brothers War this time, where Prussia wants hegemony from the Bavarians and also is taking a state from them, if I saw it correctly. Not sure if they took a state there, but they probably are now. Yeah, their sphere of influence in Germany is pretty impressive, definitely at this point. Austria, by the way, has fallen out of great power status by now, so that might... well, there's a low chance, I would say, even at this point, that it might lead to a super Germany forming, but we'll see about that, of course. If we look at the score at this point, the UK is still the #1 great power, followed by the French, the United States, and Prussia. France is the #3 in terms of its prestige, is #2 in terms of its industry, and is #3 in terms of its military strength. Yeah, that's the state of the world in 1884. I don't understand how this happened. What? I was just looking at Asia, if anything interesting is happening here. And by the way, there's a big war happening with China. But yeah, looking back at Europe, and suddenly there is a Germany that's also invading Bavaria. Like a couple months ago in game, there wasn't even a rebellion going on or anything. So I have no clue how Germany formed here. Maybe there's also like some random event in game that can form Germany. I just don't know the game well enough to know if anything like that exists. But yeah, that's what it is. Germany has formed, and it's a really strong Germany too, with Bohemia pretty much cored, with probably Bavaria as part of it in just a moment. And yeah, I think this is really cause for worry for the French, although we are seeing an Austrian invasion, and Germany is gonna be really powerful, don't get me wrong, but just right now is the worst time for an Austrian invasion, and Austria probably knows that, right? Because while they are fighting Bavaria, and while they have not yet trained all those new divisions from all those new lands, Germany might just not be strong enough yet to really pull this off. Although it looks, well, it's hard to tell so far who's winning this war. It looks pretty balanced overall. And the German mobilization is definitely going pretty well too. So yeah, if they pull it off, if they take Bavaria, and if they can contain the Austrian offensive, then Germany is going to be an absolute behemoth here and is going to be a real rival for France pretty much for the first time in the game on the European mainland. I believe the only other country that can really threaten the French is Britain, and they can only threaten the French with their navy, not with their army. So yeah, it looks like a German victory in this war. Looks like they are winning overall. And yeah, as I said, if they pull that off, if they annex Bavaria, if they successfully defend against the Austrians, then I think this Germany might be able to take back lands from the French. Other than that, we're seeing a big rebellion by Russian communists. It doesn't yet look strong enough to really pull this off and really win the Russian Civil War and form the Soviet Union, but we might see that later, of course. And the Chinese Empire has by now westernized, is trying to take over some of its former puppets, but I don't think it's not really being all that much successful right now. And all of this also means, of course, massive migration to the New World, where the United States is, of course, also an absolute superpower. But yeah, how's the Germany storyline going on? Bavaria is doing surprisingly well, basically defending their entire country, even sieging down parts of Germany. Now, of course, most of the German army is still occupied with fighting the Austrians, and I still am certain that the Germans are gonna come out victorious in this. And but yeah, really, really good effort by the Bavarians to defend themselves here. They are even a great power, which also is, I think, really, really impressive. Yeah, but so what we're gonna see at the end of this war is probably the Germans annexing all of Bavaria and the Austrians not achieving their goals. Although so far they've done pretty well, and even so far won the majority of the battles, it seems. I don't really understand the war score and how the Austrians are winning in terms of war score and winning the battles here, when on the map it just looks like they've been completely defeated. But yeah, I might just be too dumb for that, and I'll come back in just a moment and see how this war turns out. Yeah, interestingly, I might have declared the Germans victorious in this war too early, because the Bavarians with 2 really strong stacks and also the Austrians with 1 really strong stack are wiping the German armies one after the other, and we might see a Bavarian-Austrian victory in this war, which might mean Bavaria probably also taking a state from Germany, and Austria even taking 3 states from the Germans when this war is concluded. Yeah, this war is honestly insane. I mean, to quickly recap, so Germany formed without even holding the lands that they would usually need to form. They immediately declared war on Bavaria, trying to annex them. Bavaria defended itself way better than you would expect of them, which led the Austrians to invade Germany, which led to a stalemate where, excuse me, where all of these countries are pretty much out of armies at this point and have pretty much exhausted their armies and are trying to rebuild their armies as quickly as they can. And now the Hungarians are rising up in Austria and are trying to demand, well, their independence from the Austrians. And in the war right now, Bavaria has 1 really strong army left. Austria has 1 really strong army left. Germany, nothing, right? If you look at the map, Germany has 1 stack of 6 brigades here. So it seems very likely that the Austrians and Bavarians are gonna win. I think the Bavarians just made peace. But yeah, the Bavarians demanded nothing of Germany, which is a bit weird, I think. I think I would have definitely taken 1 or 2 states from Germany in their position here. But yeah. And now Austria is pretty much free to take whatever they want. And the Hungarian rebellion has ended, but now we see Venetian rebels rising up. So while they might be winning this war, it might also result in them losing some lands elsewhere for the Austrians. But overall, I still think this is a very strong Germany, and if they are given time to rebuild, they will eventually be able to annex Bavaria. They will eventually be able to challenge France, and who knows, maybe even take some lands from the French here. And there we go. This is what the peace deal of this insane war is looking like. So the Austrians took Bohemia, Moravia, and Württemberg from the Germans. And they are now once again looking really strong. They are once again a great power. And so overall, maybe the formation of Germany has benefited the Austrians more than anyone. Because by forming Germany, Prussia felt like they were strong enough to invade Bavaria, which eventually led to so much weakness that the Austrians could defeat the Prussians or Germans at that point. But yeah, I still think long term, once the Germans build all these brigades from all the new lands that they have gained by forming Germany, they might be strong enough to defeat the Bavarians eventually. They might be strong enough to defeat the Austrians again eventually, take those lands back. And then long term, that might even lead to them being strong enough to defeat the French. But yeah, if we look at the scores, in terms of the brigade counts, the French are at 350 brigades, so the Germans would have to be significantly stronger than they are right now to stand any kind of chance. They're right now at only 1/10 the amount of brigades that the French have. And if we look at the spheres of influence, also France has some puppets here. Germany has no real allies anymore. Yeah, if we look at the diplomatic situation, Germany is only allied to the Ottomans. The French are once again allied to the Russians. So it seems like even the formation of Germany and even the temporary weakness of France by betraying their Russian friends has not been enough to really bring them down or to really offer a situation where their neighbors could retake some of their lost lands from the French Empire here. And there is once again another Franco-Bavarian war German-Bavarian war, in which Germany is trying to take out Bavaria. But I believe Germany should have built up just a little longer before declaring this war again. While at this time, they might be able to defeat Bavaria if their mobilization goes well. This might be another opportunity for one of their rivals to strike, although the Austrians have nothing left to reconquer from Germany at this point. So that should probably result in no Austrian intervention and in Germany successfully taking over Bavaria. And let's not forget, Bavaria is still a great power, and adding all of Bavaria's strength into Germany is certainly going to be a significant boost for them. And another interesting event, although I once again don't know how it happened, we are seeing Italy. It might be that France has had all of these lands now in its sphere of influence, and somehow that led to the formation of Italy. Once again, I'm not familiar enough with these events to know quite exactly. Although with their capital being over here, I'm thinking it might be Sardinia Piedmont that has formed Italy after all. And this of course now adds one more country that might eventually want to take some of France's lands. So France, even though they have Italy in their sphere right now, might have just created another rival for themselves. Although if we look at brigade counts, so far no one can take on the French on the European mainland. They are having 380 brigades, with the Russians the closest power, but of course the Russians are France's allies. So again, as long as the French-Russian alliance exists and continues, I don't think there's anyone who can take that alliance down in Europe. It would take like a coalition of pretty much the rest of the world combined to really take that coalition down. Also of course with Italy and Germany both having formed, Austria has now formed Austria-Hungary. And the Great War has started over Ottoman Uganda, with France trying to acquire this colony from the Ottomans. And I believe this is going to be a very one-sided Great War, where we're going to see France and Russia absolutely destroying the Central Powers. At least Great Britain is not involved, so there might be somewhat of a chance for the Germans and Austrians if they coordinate really, really well, and if they manage to mobilize really, really well. Let's look at some early brigade counts in this war. We're looking at 370 brigades for the French, 240 for the Russians, against 170 for Germany and 150 for Austria right now, with the Ottomans bringing in another 60 brigades. I think the only thing that might offer a little bit of a chance for the Germans and Austrians here is that a lot of French brigades are actually occupied fighting in Africa, where of course they're not gonna have a massive impact on this war at all. But yeah, let's look at Europe. In the Western Front, it's a big mess, I think is fair to say. It looks pretty balanced overall. In the Italian front, it actually looks like Austria-Hungary is advancing, and France does not have enough units here right now to stop the Austro-Hungarian advance. In the east, we see Austria invading Romania and pretty much overrunning the Romanians, with Russia struggling to bring enough units in to stop the Austrians. Along the Galician front, we see Russia invading Austria-Hungary, and we see Germany advancing into Poland, but being slowly pushed back in East Prussia by the Russians. So really interesting war that is going to make or break the Central Powers and determine the future of Europe here, certainly. The Russians also want to acquire an Ottoman colony now. And so far, though, overall, it looks pretty good for the Central Powers Alliance, if we want to call them that. And I believe this early occupations that the Central Powers are managing to pull off here are gonna somewhat limit how many units France is gonna be able to mobilize, which might also be helping them out a little bit. But yeah, let's look once again in the Western Front. Still a big mess, still not really possible to tell who's winning here. The Austrians are advancing even further into southern France yet, and so far France is still not bringing the kind of units to stop that advance. Romania still being fought over by the Austrians and Russians, and it looks like Russia is gaining the upper hand in eastern Germany or in the Poland region around here. So yeah, I think this is overall really bad for the Central Powers here, because they are not able to stop their enemies on all fronts, and they are not going to be able to take out France. The only offensive that is really going well is the Austrian offensive into France, that is pretty much unchallenged. But overall, it's not looking that bad for them, at least as of right now. The war score is still slightly favoring the Central Powers, but that is mostly just due to the more battles that they won in early on into the war. But yeah, I think the war is slowly turning, and we're just seeing the numbers advantage that the Russians and French have. So yeah, the Russian offensive into Europe is at this point almost unopposed. One brave Austrian stag still trying to defeat the Russian armies where they can, but it's probably not going to be enough. And we are seeing the Russians occupying Berlin, getting far into Austria, only 2 provinces away from Vienna at this point. Yeah, the French still not opposing the Austrian advance. They're instead deciding to focus all of their units into holding the German attack here, but that is working out for them, to be fair, and they are holding the German attack, which is really, really important, I think, for them. 1 second, I think there's some sound problems I'm having here. Yeah, okay, sorry, some disturbance noises. I'm not sure if you can hear them in the recording, but it should hopefully be over now. So yeah, let's continue right here. Yeah, the last German army is now being defeated on the Western Front by the French. France is, it has to be said, almost half occupied at this point by the Austrians, but it's not gonna be enough, and it's definitely not gonna be a victory for the Central Powers here. So what are they gonna lose? They're gonna lose, well, Ottoman Uganda, the most important province in the world, of course. Also Ottoman Kars, also Dobrucha, which I'm not quite sure where it is, and Ostpreußen. So let's quickly find where Dobrucha is in the world. Dobrucha. Okay, one more province around here. Yeah, we see it now that the Russians have taken that from the Ottomans. The Ottomans have surrendered, given up their territories, and it's just going to be a moment before the Central Powers here also have to surrender to the French-Russian steamroller. And it looks like all they're going to lose is Ostpreußen, which is not the worst province in the world to lose for them. It has precious metals in Königsberg, but it doesn't have really important industrial resources other than that. So yeah, it's not going to be the end of the world for them, but seeing as to how they were already weaker to start off with, yeah, I think it just solidified that the French-Russian alliance is probably going to dominate Europe for the rest of the game here. So I think the rest of the war is not going to be that interesting to watch. It's just going to be the rest of the occupations going on here. So I'll get back to you as soon as interesting stuff happens again. So yeah, there we go. Peace was signed. East Prussia went to the Russians. Germany and Austria now both left without any army. Austria probably going to be taken over by the Jacobin rebels here. Germany and Austria also both have lost significant amounts of their industry and significant amount of power in the world. And this massive destructive war has led to lots and lots of people emigrating from Europe, mostly, of course, into the USA, but also into some South American countries. So in the end, the main victory of this war might even belong to the USA and to South America, just because they're receiving so many new migrants. But of course, also this war was won by France and by Russia, who have demonstrated that no one can stop them, and who have demonstrated that they are the superpowers of this world. Although it's fair to say we can't underestimate the kinds of losses that the French have also suffered in this war. As you see right here, the French only having 2 or 3 armies in Europe in total right now. And even Italy seems to have a larger standing army in Europe than the French at this point. Now, of course, France can also mobilize millions of soldiers. But just in terms of their standing army, yeah, this war was absolutely devastating for everyone involved. The British pulling off a bit of an unfair move here and just steamrolling the recently defeated Ottomans, trying to take even more lands from them, of course. And yeah, the center of Europe is now just in constant rebellion by communists, Jacobins. What are we seeing here in Romania? Even Hungarian nationalists rising up in Romania. So yeah, we can see the battlefield of this war is an absolute mess. I think it's usually a worrying sign when German communists and German fascists are working together to overthrow the German government. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what comes out of this mess. And yeah, it seems that the communists have won in Germany, and Germany is now a proletarian dictatorship, but probably not for long, looking at the kinds of, at the amount of fascist rebels that are now taking over Germany. So yeah, this Germany is out of control. Yeah, Mr. Leonhard Dreyer here is gonna have quite a story to tell his kids of how he, in his tank, single-handedly killed like 1 million German fascists. And now Germany is fascist. They're just going through all the different ideologies, and Leonhard Dreyer decided that after killing 1 million fascists, now's a good time to turn fascist himself. And his one little tank is still here, now sieging down this province from some communist rebels this time. And yeah, fascist Germany has decided to commit suicide by opposing the Franco-Russian alliance in this crisis. Okay, yeah, well, they peaced out. Smart move there. This war would, well, I don't think I even need to say how this war would have ended. It's pretty obvious. So yeah, 1921, we're about 15 years away from the end of the game. And so far, the Great War has led to Germany turning fascist, to Austria-Hungary, after all, remaining Austria-Hungary, which is kind of surprising, or remaining the same government in Austria-Hungary, which is kind of surprising. Russia having a bit of a rebellion spiral with communists, but overall, they're pretty well able to kill all the communist rebels. And France is and remains the #1 great power in Europe. So yeah, that's, I guess, already maybe an early kind of end of the video kind of talk, because I don't think that we're gonna see any kind of great war or anything happening at the rest of this game that might overthrow the Franco-Russian alliance. It's just too powerful. So yeah, what would happen if France had its Napoleonic borders? Well, France would remain a great power in Europe apparently, and France would be able to fight off the Germans, fight off the Austro-Hungarians, fight off the Italians, fight off the Spanish, fight off the British, and remain, yeah, pretty much the #1. What would also happen is that the USA would, well, just like in real history, I suppose, massively benefit from millions and millions of migrants coming over from the war-torn countries of Europe. Yeah, what else interesting, what other kind of interesting stuff can we see in the world? Japan is, of course, also a great power. Let's see real quickly here. The #4, even at this point. China has managed to become a great power and conquer some of its puppet states. And yeah, who's the main winners of this campaign? Well, I would say France obviously did pretty well, which was kind of to be expected with how powerful and mighty they started. Germany and Austria were a huge fail in this campaign. Denmark did a surprisingly good job colonizing, as did the Ottomans, so huge props to both of those countries too. Yeah, the Russians and French, I guess, did a good job diplomatically staying allied for most of the game. I think the only situation where France was really at risk was when they lost their alliance with Russia. If we had seen the same war against Austria and Germany without Russia helping France, it might have very well turned out differently. But yeah, other than that, nothing super crazy happened in this timeline. Overall, still a world dominated by the British Empire and still a Europe dominated by the French Empire. So in that way, it's pretty close to the Napoleonic Wars, I suppose. Industrially, we saw for a brief moment, I don't know if I ever mentioned it, but we saw for a brief moment the French even overtaking the UK and becoming the #1 industrial power before the Great War. But the UK has now picked up again and is now the greatest industrial power again, with the USA at the #2 spot. Or sorry, the USA now at the #3 spot. I guess they and France are pretty much at the same level. We're seeing the UK also being the biggest military power in the world, followed by USA, Japan, Russia, and then Germany, which is stronger than France. How is Germany stronger than France here? Soldiers and army? So Germany has a stronger army than France with its like 3 little brigades? Ooh, okay, one more interesting thing I guess happening in this game. A German-Italian war against Austria-Hungary that even France joined in. Why would France get involved in this? I don't get it. But anyways, doesn't seem like any borders changed either. That was a weird quick war there. Okay, anyways. I'm really surprised by this number. This doesn't seem to make any sense. How is Germany's army stronger than France's army here? If we look at their brigade counts, yeah, France at 330 brigades and Germany at 55. So yeah, that seems broken. Maybe that's bugged. I don't know. Oh, also Spain invading Portugal. Sorry, I'm getting, well, I should focus. What I'm trying to say is, thank you all already for watching. I'll, of course, let the game run all the way to 1936 and see if anything else interesting happens in that time. But for now, yeah, I think this was a really cool campaign, and I hope you all join us back in the next one. And it looks like we are gonna have one more Great War before the end of this game. And this time it's gonna be Austria-Hungary and Germany with the help of the United Kingdom trying to stop the Franco-Russian attempt to liberate Poland from Austria-Hungary. Just quickly before the war breaks out, let's look at the kind of brigade counts we're looking at in this war. The UK, of course, having an absolutely gigantic army, but once again, most of that is in India, where it might not be all that useful, but maybe they'll have some way to get those armies into Russia and invade the soft underbelly of Russia, so to say. But other than the gigantic UK army, we see the French with 370 and the Russians with 311 brigades, versus Germany's 120 and Austria-Hungary's 92. So even with the help of Great Britain, I think it's gonna be one more destruction of Germany and Austria here. But yeah, any second now the war is gonna fire. We can also maybe quickly look at the spheres to see the kind of allies both sides are hoping to get in. So the Austrian side might get the Ottomans in. Let's see if they got the Ottomans in. Yes, they also got the Ottomans in. So it's basically the Central Powers once again reunited with the UK on their side versus the Franco-Russian Giga Alliance. Let's see here. Early on, once again, we have a difficult and confusing Western Front, although I think last time it looked better at the very start for the Germans. So yeah, not looking great for the Germans on the Western Front. Also this time, the Austro-Hungarians not having such an easy time pushing into Italy. France way more able to contest that. And yeah, once again, the only front where it looks kind of okay going for the Central Powers is in Poland and here in the east. But even here we see the Romanian and Russian armies already advancing into Austria-Hungary. At the same time, the Ottomans, or even the British, I should say, are fighting the Russians here in the Caucasus, where it is also a front that is hard to tell who's winning so far. And in Africa, of course, we're seeing a war this time between the Ottoman and British forces versus the French. So the African front might be the one front where the Central Powers stand a real chance of victory against the French. Here in West Africa, for example, we can already see a Central Powers victory. But, oh, what is this? It seems like Germany has more troops than I expected, to be honest. It seems like maybe their mobilization as a fascist country, I think they can mobilize more brigades than they could as a monarchy. And the UK is actually helping out with a massive invasion into northern France. And it looks like this war might end up being interesting after all. But here comes Italy. Here comes Italy saying, no, you can't have an interesting war. I'm gonna make this war uninteresting again by, well, tipping the scale towards a Franco-Russian victory by helping the Franco-Russian side and invading Austria-Hungary. Of course, overall, a smart move by Italy to attack the Austrians when they're weakest and take some of their cores from the Austro-Hungarians here. Yeah, in the east, pretty difficult to say who's winning along this front. Looks pretty balanced. Same for this front, maybe even Germany in a slight advantage so far. And it looks like, yeah, the British-German advance here was doing pretty well overall. Who won this war? Who won this war? I can't say who won this war. But it seems like France and Russia might have been defeated, no? Like, their armies that they have left over are pretty insignificant here, I would say. I mean, of course, Italy is now... Well, even Italy, it seems like they might be defeated by the Austrians. Huh, interesting, interesting. I think it was one of those wars where in the long term, maybe the Franco-Russians would have won. But in the short term, the Germans, British, and Austrians just had more offensive power and were winning those early battles, and that's what got them the victory here. But it wasn't a significant enough victory to really get anything off their enemies in the war either. So overall, I'd say it was a white peace. But yeah, that's pretty surprising, to be honest, that they even managed to pull off a white peace here at the end. And here comes the German offensive to acquire Württemberg from the Austrians. And surprisingly, they even have British help in this war. So yeah, that was a pretty quick war, and I believe a German victory. Yes, definitely a German victory. Interesting that the Germans didn't also try to take Bohemia or Moravia back from the Austrians. They have cores on those states. But yeah, overall, this is still a really interesting and dynamic world that we're looking at right now. And I'm kind of sad that the game's already ending in something like 3 years. Yeah, we have 3 more years to play. So we're probably not going to see how this world is going to continue, because the truces will block these countries from fighting it out once more. The only thing we could see is a potential like Spanish invasion of France, but I don't think Spain is bold enough to pull that off. So probably we're not going to see any more big things happening here. But if you look at brigade counts now, after all these wars, we're seeing Germany surprisingly close to the French. And if we consider that France has to use some of its armies to defend its colonies, of course, then in Europe, I think Germany is by now stronger than France and might be able to defeat the French if only we had enough time to, well, if only we could give them the time to do that. But as it is, it seems like, yeah, the Napoleonic borders France was able to hold on to most of its empire for pretty much 100 years. And by now is still one of the greatest powers in the world. But by now its rivals are growing strong enough, so they will eventually be able to take it down. Although we're not going to see that in this game. If we could somehow continue this campaign in Hearts of Iron 4, then we'd probably see, well, the anti-French coalition take down France here. Also, I'm just noticing, I think what they took in the Great War before was these Austrian regions that Austria took from France, right? And I somehow didn't notice that because how else would Austria be ruling these regions again? So yeah, that's probably with the outcome of the Great War. Sorry for missing that. But all right, we have about 2 years left in the game now. So let's quickly go over some final statistics. If we look at the world right now, China is obviously the most populated country at 470 million. Then we have the UK at 290, USA at 130, France at 120, Russia 112, Germany at 71 million. And yeah, you can see then Japan, Austria, Brazil, and so on. The most provinces is, of course, the UK, then Russia, then France. So no big surprises, I think, here. Most factories belong to France, so while they don't have the biggest industry, they at least have the most spread out industry, I guess. The highest literacy, well, a couple countries have 100% literacy. In terms of the majors, France has 91% literacy, Germany at 95, Japan at 93, so a couple countries coming really close to having 100. Leadership, I think not that interesting. Brigade counts, we looked at that just a moment ago, but yeah, UK, USA, Japan. These three, I think, are usually the kind of countries that have the highest brigade counts at the end of the game, just because they sit on an island, or Japan also on an island, of course, or the USA, which is almost like an island because it's so remote and so far away from any other great powers. And that means that they usually never get occupied, or almost never get occupied, and their population can just grow forever and spawn new military soldier pops forever. And then China with also a massive, here we are, brigade count, just from its absolutely gigantic population, of course. In terms of navy, yeah, the UK rules the waves. Although the next couple countries are really interesting, with Brazil, the Ottomans, Denmark having the next three biggest navies. Those are not the kind of countries you'd expect to have the largest navies after the UK. And yeah, surprisingly, countries like the USA or France not even having those gigantic navies you'd expect from them. What else is maybe interesting to look at? Who has the most soldier pops? Yeah, it's the UK and then China. So surprisingly, the UK having more soldier pops than China. Let's see who has the most capitalists. It's once again the UK. Yeah, and let's maybe take one final look around the world. So in North America, the USA pretty much did as well as historical. They took some very ugly borders from Canada additionally and one state from Mexico. But yeah, pretty good game for the USA, as is every game, to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen an AI USA fail in Victoria2. Africa, we know how Africa looks. Britain, France, and the Ottomans are the main colonizers, with, well, notable shout out, I guess, to Denmark for colonizing pretty much Nigeria here. India, not that is interesting. Persia was rising a little bit. China became a great power, which is quite interesting. Nothing too crazy going on in East Asia. And, well, what's that? We finally have Poland acquiring all the state with course, from Russia in the... Oh no. From Russia in the last moment is what I'm trying to say. And now about, well, 3 months from the end of the game, we see the Swedish liberation of northern Finland, where Germany is trying to stick it to all its neighbors. But unfortunately, we're just not going to have enough time left in this game to see this war properly play out. But maybe from how it goes over the first 3 months, we can already kind of deduce, I guess, who would have won the war. So yeah, let's just quickly look at some brigade counts and maybe pause the game. So the early mobilization has brought Germany 230 brigades against France's 250 and Russia's 80. So with France having lots of brigades locked away in Africa, this might have been the war where Germany finally manages to defeat the French Empire and retake its course from them. But yeah, once again, in the last 2 months we have of the game, I don't think it's gonna be enough time to see that play out. And after all, it was enough time, but Germany didn't want any states back. They just wanted Sweden to get northern Finland and not get anything themselves, despite having cores on both their neighbors. Yeah, the AI can be really weird in this game. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. That was the France with Napoleonic Borders campaign of Victoria2. And please let me know if you enjoyed this video and what kind of scenario you would like to see in the next Victoria2 playthrough. With all that said, thank you all so much for watching. Have a nice day, morning, evening, whatever. And see you next time. Bye-bye.